Okay. Thank you to those of you who have logged in online, and to those of you who are here in the room. As in the previous session, we have many more people online than in the room, but I will briefly give you an overview of what we did in the previous session before we kick off the roundtable. Welcome again. My name is Arndt Hussar. I work for the South Asia Department in the Asian Development Bank. And today we are gathering for an hour and a half to do a practitioner roundtable where we have invited folks to talk a bit about their work in DPI and the challenges and opportunities they see. And we hope to get many of you involved. Bear with us if you are dialing in to this session. We will try to spot your questions and read them out. And if it's convenient, also bring you into the conversation. Now, let me just briefly talk about our recently published study. Can you advance the slide for me, please? As you may have seen, ADB recently published a study on the DPI landscape in South Asia. The idea with the study was to take a look at where we are, to take stock of the rapid advancement in DPI adoption around the region, and to look at the challenges and opportunities that persist. I'm showing a slide that quickly explains, gives you a snapshot of what DPI is. We expect that most of you who've dialed into the session are already engaged with DPI in some shape or form. But just as a reminder, there is typically an understanding of a core DPI, which includes things like digital ID, digital payments, or data exchange. There are some of the partner organizations we work with include more, such as trust infrastructure or facilitation of commerce. So there are, it's an evolving picture, but for the purpose of the study, we've looked at these three core DPIs and then a variety of applications around sectors, which we called sector DPI. But very important to note that these are meant to be interoperables. Even if we talk about sector DPI, the idea is to leverage the core DPI as a base. So what did this study find? We found a diverse picture, obviously, around the region. We have very small member countries, and we also have very large and experienced member countries who embarked on this DPI journey quite some time ago. So obviously, India is recognized around the world as a leader in DPI. They have started years ago with their digital ID work and have really evolved the ecosystem across various core DPIs. They're also embarking on sector DPI. And what we see here is a picture where you can tell that many countries are already either in the mature or in the emerging stage, thinking about their vision and their strategy on DPI. Whereas when you go to the bottom here towards the ecosystem participation, for example, or the sectors, there is still work to do. Also want to point out that we have everyone pretty much crowding in the middle here and emerging when it comes to policy and safeguards. Mauritius is still pictured here as nascent, but they have on the anvil, literally about to be approved, a whole host of policies that will also move them into that middle bucket. And what does that mean? That means that safeguards is a space where still a lot needs to be done, and where the picture is also so rapidly evolving with challenges around digital risk emerging all the time that need to be tackled, and that our policies and safeguards need to adapt to. So one more slide here on the study. And that is generally looking at the findings, trying to summarize really a report that you will see is about 80 pages looking at South Asia, and then another 80 that we would invite you to dig into with best practices from around the world and case studies. what we find is that there are certain things that we still need to really focus on. One of them is a gap in terms of data exchange. And our partners from Dalberg, which we did the study with, pointed this out in their conversations with governments around the region. This came up again and again. And we do think that this is also an area where ADB, as a development partner with lots of operations around various sectors, can do better in nudging things forward, in supporting data exchange interoperability between sectors. Payments has been the strongest rail that we see, the strongest space for DPI. Countries around the region are heavily involved, and you can tell that also the private sector has understood the value and has really picked it up. And then in terms of the integration and reuse, I'm moving from 3 to 1 here on the core DPI. The rails are scaling, but we do think that there is more work to do on leveraging core DPI like digital ID into the everyday transactions and high value registries. This also includes not just the ID for persons, but also the ID for various other things, from assets to infrastructure assets included, and also enterprises, businesses. In the enabling environment, we did point out in the study, we kind of dove a little bit deeper into this topic on trust. We do need to maintain or win the trust of citizens around the region. It is, these digital technologies, the digital infrastructure is constantly under attack, and cyber attacks are not uncommon, and there is a lot of mischief happening in the digital space, and that trust needs to be won and maintained by those operating the digital public infrastructure. So trust is not just a problem that you have to win as a government, but you have to factor in that it's not just you providing a safe infrastructure. You need to be mindful of the fast evolving space around you, and that's a tough challenge. So these are just some insights from our study that we wanted to share at the beginning of this session. We just wrapped up another session where we talked more in depth about it and the broader picture of what ADB wants to do in DPI. This session, however, is meant to be a roundtable for DPI practitioners. Those who are already heavily engaged and those who are thinking about it and providing opportunities for DPI deployment. So I'm very happy to already have on screen some of the people who we've invited to be our discussants. You can see that we have here 4 topics which we want to cover in the next 1.5 hours. And the folks who are on camera, welcome, guys. They are meant to be our first discussants, but there is 3 dots here under each of these topics, which means that you also invited when you've joined online to please raise your hand or to put your question or comment into the chat box so we can incorporate you as well into these discussions. Each of these topics will be kicked off by a facilitator who will share briefly about what we have drawn from the South Asia study, and then we'll pose a question to our discussants who are free to riff off of that, and we will take about 15 to 20 minutes for each of these. So without taking more time, I want to hand it over to Carolyn Flory from our digital sector office to lead the first discussion on making the business case for DPI investments.
Thank you, Arndt. Good morning, everyone. And very excited to kick off this session. We had a great discussion this morning, really digging into, we heard from the chief economist, we heard from representatives from the South Asia region, from the digital sector office, and really showing that the ADB is very serious about digital public infrastructure and our investments. So very excited to see some friends on the screen, some of whom are winning the award for most dedication to DPI. So getting up at 3 a.m. So really appreciate it. We can see that the passion for DPI runs deep. I want to, let's see. The first topic that we're going to kind of be discussing, and again, as Arndt said, please, please, if you're online, I think we have quite a good number of people and in the room. Do feel free to pose your questions. Sarvesh is monitoring the questions and we'll bring them together and really want this to be an open talk. We are amongst friends and really want to pull from your insights as well as a community. So the first topic is around making the business case for DPI investments. And we actually ended this morning's session with a key question around how do we make this case? So on the slide here, you can see sort of a three prongs of how DPI investments are sold, I guess, pitched, how the impact that they're making, as well, how we can ensure that governments see the return on investment for digital public infrastructure. So really starting with that social and equity impact. We heard from Vineet from CDPI this morning around how, if leveraged, DPI can really have an impact in extending services, benefits, financial inclusion for users in country. Then going up to economic, really looking at how GDP growth can be linked to implementations around DPI. What is the business case there? What types of data and information are important for governments to say, yes, this isn't just a standalone project. This is something that's really building the foundation of digital transformation. And then there is a return on that investment for the economy as a whole. For example, in Cambodia, that was a very question that we received from the government to say, what is the return on investment? Why should we be doing this? And we were able to show that year on year, through kind of a rough initial cost benefit analysis, this investment for just the cybersecurity component of digital public infrastructure was going to have a $30 million return, just preventing incidents of cybersecurity and cyber attacks. So really making that case too. And then the third prong of this is around environmental. So being able to link digital public infrastructure and DPGs to things like controlling of emissions. So really looking at these three prongs and making the business case. And so we have some initial questions, and I'm also looking at the screen to see if our discussants are ready. So in your experience, just to kind of kick us off, really looking at what types of value matter the most when really making the case for DPI? What was really making that business case? And what has helped or hindered or prevented in making that case when you're liaising with governments, when you're liaising with line ministries as well? So I'll stop there and just really want to kick off the conversation. I am looking at the screen. No one's at Dasun or Jordan, if you'd like to jump in. I will ask before you start speaking if you could introduce yourself and maybe your organization before we kick off comments. But Dasun, I saw that you came off mute first, so I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be here. Sorry if I sound a bit sleepy because I'm connecting from Morocco today. It's very, very early here. So I'm Dasun Hagoda. I work as a technical advisor in the Digital Economy Unit, Presidential Secretariat, Government of Sri Lanka. Great to join this discussion. So I think I can take our journey as an example and explain how the approach we have taken and how it'll make a impact on economy, socially as well as environmentally and beyond. I think so. Right now, Sri Lanka is at $3 to $4 billion digital economy, and we have the ambitious target of reaching 15 billion USD by 2030. So we have there are multiple approaches to solve this problem. One is to build uh, lots of siloed systems, and other approach is to take the digital public infrastructure route, or enable think from a digital public infrastructure point of view to approach this problem, right? So we have the route we have selected is the DPI route. So we are planning to build core DPIs such as identity, data exchange payments, and beyond as well. So we are looking at G2P as a key DPI, verifiable credential as a key DPI, e-local government as a key DPI, and so on and so forth. So these components will be managed centrally. So the way we see is DPI is not a cost center. It is like roads, power. The beauty is that once you build these core components, every program we run on top of it become cheaper and cheaper, and it enables other systems or other sectors to run. So I think the presentation rightly explained about the foundational DPIs, and we are building sectorial DPIs on top of it, and layer is the use cases that we build to enable the service delivery. So every fragmented system we fund today become a liability tomorrow, but DPI will not uh, will not happen like that, which means it'll have some initial cost, but the return on investment is much higher than building siloed systems, because government it allows governments to spend money on people, which means to deliver value rather than spending money on building systems everywhere. So that way it shortens the distance between the policy intent and citizen impact, which means government can focus on delivering value effectively and efficiently. So on the other hand, also it allows or it shifts the thinking from procurement to policy imagination. So which means once you have your foundational DPIs, imagination is your limit basically. Whatever you imagine, you can quickly build on top of it because your core building blocks are there. You mix and match, you build the service even in a crisis. It enables to deliver services without rewriting systems. So the way we see it is DPI investment compound over time, and each new use case you build once you have the core DPI become an ROI for you. So it strengthens the capacity of a government very fast, and helps to deliver value to citizens in much broader manner. So with that note, I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dasun. I can only wish that I was so eloquent at 3:30 in the morning. So a lot of really interesting nuggets there, and I'm going to pass it to Jordan. I think I really appreciated the every fragmented system today becomes a liability tomorrow. So really love that framing. Jordan, I'll pass it over to you if you could introduce yourself and maybe respond or introduce a new aspect from the co-developed perspective.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Carolyn. And I think this merges perfectly. Dasun can give the country perspective, and maybe I'll zoom out a little bit and give some more of the global perspective here. So I'm Jordan. I'm from Co-Develop. We're a fund that works on digital public infrastructure, a philanthropic fund. And our sort of goal is to disseminate DPI thinking and help countries along their DPI journey, both on the tech adoption side, as well as thinking about safeguards and policy. And when we think about the business case, I'll point to a few pieces of research that have come across our radar and we funded. The first is from UCL on the economic case. And this UCL report highlights three sort of areas, domains that DPI makes an impact. The first is direct impacts. So this is when government implements DPI and there maybe are, for example, public sector cost savings in deduplicating beneficiaries, reducing corruption and other types of fraud. But then there's also these dynamic, which is kind of like the second level, dynamic impacts, as they call it, which is, potentially, let's say the private sector is able to use a digital ID and improve their authentication. So it's not a direct impact, but it's actually a use in the economy that then is driving some savings. But then the third piece they highlight is that there's also these market shaping impacts. So there's several examples of this, but if a country is moving from cash to digital payments, that might increase tax compliance, or other kind of market shaping dynamics that happen when countries move through a transition towards digital. So I'd encourage you to look at that paper. Another one I'll point out was from Arthur Global. And what's interesting is if you look at the annual returns on DPI, the Artha team found that an economy that reaches towards population scale impact can expect 0.15 to 0.3% of a growth boost, which is actually somewhat in line with that stat that's on screen, around 1% of economic growth in approximately 4 or 5 years. And that might sound like a small number, but if every country around the world moved towards a DPI model and managed to get adoption, this Artha piece highlights that this could be a $1 trillion area of growth for the world. So there's huge potential here. In terms of your question, Carolyn, on what matters to countries, one thing that we find that a lot of countries are focused on right now, particularly given the global geopolitical climate, is sovereignty and lock-in. And what that means is, countries don't need to have homegrown systems that only were built in country, but they need to have some agency, whether it's for business reasons or political reasons. If a country wants to switch systems, they really want the capacity and capability to say, yes, I can switch. And a lot of that relies on, potentially both on open source with ownership, but also open standards to say, if I build a payment system, I'm not locked into one provider. So that's sort of a key piece that we're focused on as well. In terms of the evidence, and I'll try to wrap somewhat quickly here, I would say the evidence is a laggard in this space, and I refer often to the quote from the economist Robert Solow that you can see the evidence of digitalization everywhere in the world except for in the productivity statistics. And we did a mapping with a group called Dial on the various pieces of evidence in the DPI space. I put it in the chat as well. Please check it out. It kind of creates a global picture of some of the evidence pieces on DPI. But clearly there's a need for a lot more, and particularly as countries in Asia go through this journey. I would highlight that researcher and government coordination is really important at the outset. Like even the India case, we know doesn't have the kind of impact statistics that we would love to see, even though we know how impactful this transformation has been in India. And that's partly because there was a limited effort to create a baseline at the outset of the implementation. So we're really conscious of both wanting to do rigorous research that has, clear, high quality data over many years showing the longitudinal impact. And so we're working with Oxford and JPAL on this question, among other researchers. And then also some of the more deployment-focused inclusion measurement. Really, we believe that at Co-Develop that every country deploying DPI should have some understanding of who is able to access the system and who is left behind. And so we're working with Global Development Network and Dahlberg, among others, on this project as well. And this is more rapid data to understand who's being reached and who's not. So in the interest of time, I could go on, but I'll pause there, Carolyn, and maybe we can open up. There's much more to cover.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jordan. I'm going to take a pause and see if there are any questions from both either in the room or online. So my first question to Dasun, just as people are thinking of their questions, and feel free to post those, is recognizing that the Sri Lankan case was really looking at centrally managed DPI, and we've had these types of cases in other countries as well, right? There's a lot of there's a vision for what digital transformation and DPI rollout is going to be, but we also had to, as we're talking to other line ministries, as we're discussing things like data exchange or use cases for the use of DPI, making that business case has also been quite a challenge just within government. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what those conversations have looked like as you're showing this is the return on investment. We understand and believe that this is not a cost center. How are you translating it? So does it link to any of the things on the screen in terms of social impact, equity, environment, or what are some of the, I don't know, more convincing information that you can provide to some of your colleagues in government?
Yes, very good question. I think this is a challenge not only for government of Sri Lanka, but a challenge I see across all countries. So I think a framework I suggest is that there's no one size fits solution. So we need to identify the stakeholders and what are the incentives that can be given to each stakeholder. So I'll take an a very hypothetical example. So if you are making the DPI investment use case, let's say to a minister, right? Very hypothetical. So what we should tell him is what DPI will give him. How does it allows the minister to get selected, right? So that is the incentive for him. How does DPI will allow him to better serve citizens, right? How does DPI allow the ministry or the departments to transform the service delivery? So that's one route, right? So that's for the high level stakeholders. Then if we are at the same time, citizens are the key customer of the government. So, how do we translate this to citizens? Because it is very important that we design and deliver DPI in a citizen centric manner and we educate citizens on this journey. So, another angle would be how do we communicate the incentives that are given to the citizens? You can access your service online. You don't have to fill your name and address every time. If you have a identity component, if you have a data exchange component, once you keep your thumb or once you get authenticated online, your data will be transferred from your ID platform into your passport application within 5 seconds. So that's the catch, right? So that's the incentive which is given to citizens. So I think similarly, I can go on, but in the interest of time, the framework to think is identify your stakeholders, identify the incentives given, and classify them as economic, social, environmental, technology, because you need to make the case for, let's say, if you are making the case for a IT director, right, in a ministry, you need to clearly showcase the engineering value it brings, uh, the business value it will bring, and how do you bring the good governance in here. So similarly, there are various approaches. There's no one strategy to do it based on the stakeholders. You need to take a different route. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's a question online which says if DPIs are not a cost center, then where does the financing come from, especially as an example for small countries where other priorities may compete with DPI? And how does it then relate into long-term sustainability of maintaining the infrastructure?
Yeah, I saw that question. Maybe I could jump in briefly. Um, I also saw within that question there are some on public and private sector. So I think look, I completely hear the motivation that in small countries or countries with limited budgets, sometimes it is challenging to justify what appears to be a very large investment in DPI. But for this piece, I'd really, ooh, I don't know if that posted properly, but I encourage you to check out a piece from Jen Palka, which really lays this out well. I don't know if that will post, but anyway, what Jen lays out is that too often in government digitization projects, and this is true in the U.S., this is true of many projects financed by multilateral development banks, is that too often they are financed as large monolithic projects that sort of have a massive budget, um, are financed by a loan, and build out a set of technology over a period of 3 to 5 years, not getting to users quickly, not testing and iterating. And what Jen Palka lays out is an alternate case where countries really approach DPI like a product. You'd never imagine the private sector building $100 million system without testing users first. They would start with something small with a couple use cases. They would, potentially rely on open source systems or, other available code rather than building everything from scratch. And they would start and iterate on the piece of code over time in the system, rather than kind of coming in top down, implementing an entire system from scratch, and then trying to think about the concerns of scaling that system. Um, I think within that, there's questions about owned and maintained by the public and private sector as well. Uh, this is interesting too because many countries we've seen. For example, in Ethiopia, just did a partnership with Visa and Tech5, where the private sector came in and provided the code for free, but then agreed to extract rents along with the government on every transaction that the system was building in the long run. And so this is a potential model, and we can't say that, look, that this is immediately bad, but we, have concerns about countries getting locked into a system where a private sector organization is controlling the infrastructure indefinitely, without kind of an end date, and countries get locked into a system and end up paying a lot more than they would if they had financed it in a better way up front. So I think, look, there are many ways to maintain infrastructure, but within those approaches, there need to be guardrails to private sector engagement. There need to be there needs to be concern about potential exclusion risk by increasing costs for things like ID, right? We don't want ID to be financed through costs that exclude the lowest income people. Um, and we're thinking a lot about that at Co-Develop, is how to push countries towards an approach that will meet their needs in the short run, but also not burden them in the long run, with a massive cost burden.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jordan and Dasun. I'm getting a note that I think, unfortunately, this has been, I mean, we could talk about this for 90 plus minutes, just this topic, but really appreciate both of your comments. A lot of things to consider and think about. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Prasanna Laldas, who's going to lead us into our next session. But please, if there are more questions, everyone's still online as well, and we can be responding and having a bit of a back and forth there as well. But in the meantime, I'll hand it to Prasanna for leveraging open standards in software.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. If you can just flip to the next slide, please. Let's talk DPGs. And actually, the conversation just now is a really good way into thinking about DPGs. Jordan's example of, for sovereignty and other reasons, countries needing to shift from proprietary systems, so to speak, to more flexible technical environments is a good argument for DPGs. And there are many others, sort of building iteratively using sort of prototypes or use cases before building massive systems is another potential good argument for DPGs. DPG is not the only way of doing DPIs, but for many people, DPGs are where DPI implementation actually does become real. It is especially powerful in contexts where, as we just heard, you need to work iteratively over a period of time, test and refine. Your requirements change and evolve over a period of time. And you want a development approach that is flexible and adaptable. And DPGs can be pretty powerful in that context. In many other cases, you might need to work, especially through the public sector, when you're working with multiple agencies, often with different legacy systems, for instance, sort of bringing DPGs into the mix can help clean up the technical environment, so to speak. And like we just said, if you are in an environment in which you want to test out multiple technical approaches, in which you want to work with multiple vendors potentially, just to understand your options, DPGs can be pretty powerful in that case also, versus sort of being locked into a relationship with a specific vendor that ties you to technical preferences of that vendor, rather than responding to the public benefit needs that you and the government need to be following. So DPGs can be pretty powerful. And if you look at a slide there, they're also apparently cheaper and faster. What's not to like about that, right? They have, in many cases, proved to be cheaper and faster, but just using DPGs is not a magic solution. You need to have the right circumstances for DPGs to be actually effective. And you need to be sort of thinking through specific contexts before you bring DPGs into your environment. And to talk about some of the realities of the DPG environment, we have two wonderful speakers. We already heard from Dasun. We already met him, but I just want to start with him. And Dasun, in Sri Lanka, you have a long and deep experience with digital development, building systems, many successful ones, but also you faced many of the traditional challenges public sector digital systems often have. Systems that don't talk to each other, data that does not flow very well across systems, duplication, other challenges. And I just wanted to ask you, as you're embarking on the DPI journey, what kind of a DPG environment are you putting into place? What have you learned from your experience building DPI, building digital systems in government in the past? And how are you creating conditions to use DPGs effectively in the Sri Lankan environment?
All right. Thank you for that question. Like you rightly said, Sri Lanka has a vibrant open source ecosystem. There are even product companies that are based out of Sri Lanka who does open source and they support products globally. Uh, I see there's a huge potential within the government as well as in the private sector for accommodating and adapting digital public goods. So right now, we are for the ID implementation, we are taking MOSIP as the foundational system, and we are exploring set of other DPGs also to build our core capabilities for verifiable credential, data exchange, G2P transfer. There are prominent DPGs that are out there that will enable to build a digital economy, to build proper infrastructure that can digitally sovereign, because one thing that is non-negotiable is to compromise on the sovereignty. So when we say sovereignty, there are three layers. You have the data sovereignty. On top of that, you have the operational sovereignty. Then as a country, you need to have the legal sovereignty. So these are key element of this journey. So the advantage of taking this route is that uh, I'm not against proprietary solutions because that needs to be there. As an example, if you are doing ID system implementation, yes, your core will be open source. But if you take products like ABIS, automated biometric identification systems, it'll be proprietary. So there are certain components that can be proprietary, but your core need to be open source. That way, uh, it'll reduce the risk of being vendor locked in. or as a nation, you won't be bind to a single contractor. Rather, you will have more negotiation power. You can replace certain components independently. So with open standards, so government can be a platform. You don't have to run things in silo. So we one ambition target we have is to have whole of government interoperability. For that, we need technical interoperability, we need organizational interoperability, we need semantic interoperability. We need all that in one bucket, which uh, digital public goods are enabling to a larger extent. So that's a positive thing. And on the other hand, uh, there are ecosystems that are built around these DPGs, so countries can learn from each other, which is a good thing, and also countries can contribute, which means a module that is built out of Sri Lanka can be used in another country. So DPGs turned basically public investment into a national advantage across the world, and build transparency to deliver services to citizens, which is a very good thing in your DPI journey. Uh, yeah, so those are my initial thoughts with the topic.
Thank you, Dasan. That's really interesting, and I have a lot of questions I wanted to follow up on. But just one very quick clarification. One of the benefits you talked about using DPGs, especially open standards, is the fact that you can bring in sort of a larger ecosystem of actors into what platforms you develop, so to speak. The idea of government as a platform, right? I just wanted to, and a big part of that is sort of bringing in smaller companies in the private sector, the digital inclusion agenda that we heard about this morning. I just wanted to just understand from you, from as a government, as you think of DPG, are you taking any specific action steps to make sure that that smaller firms, smaller companies actually will have an opportunity to participate in the ecosystem that you build? Are you putting in place any specific programs in that space to support your DPG approach?
Yes, yes. So there are many things, starting from hackathons where smaller companies can build systems to showcase value and be part of the larger ecosystem, uh, to deliver value to citizens. That's one thing that we have planned. And if you look at our digital economy blueprint, if you have seen, inclusiveness is one key pillar that we have, or one key principle we have. So when you say inclusiveness, it is for citizens, it is for government servants, it is for companies, uh, it is inclusiveness by design. And the third point I want to make very quickly is that uh, I have seen the large companies are partnering with smaller companies because these smaller companies has superior technical capabilities sometimes than the larger companies. So I have seen in some programs or DPI implementations, there are a lot of partnerships that are happening, which is very, very nice to see. Because the idea is not to build silos, and these learnings and opportunities can be taken into a global stage as well. When they are successful in Sri Lanka, that can be taken out as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Dasan. Everybody in the room, please keep thinking of questions, and people online as well. Going to come to you for questions. But right now, Mark, for you to come in and present ADB's perspective on DPGs, what are you doing at this point to become part of the larger DPG conversation worldwide and to bring DPGs into ADB's operational portfolio?
Thank you so much, Prasanna, and good morning, everyone. Thanks to Art and Caroline for bringing the ADB IT department. Thanks also to all of you online, Dasun, I admire your courage very early. Thank you so much. So I'm speaking from a slightly different perspective. I'm with the ADB IT department, and in a way, the slide that is there, we want to see how flipping it around from a sort of DPG producer, what it would mean for ADB. And so this is a trajectory that started some time ago when we investigated the possibility of ADB joining the DPG Alliance, which we did at the end of 2024 from an IT department entry, but as an ADB-wide approach, with the thinking that a lot of the software that we are producing for the organization can be turned and certified as DPG to support organizations and developing member countries beyond our own ADB usage. And so there's a scaling approach to this thinking, and the sort of pro and cons that you see on the slide is still very relevant in that context. So just to give an example, the first system that was ADB issued, developed, that was a DPG certified, so certified by the DPG Alliance, was the Green Road Toolkit, which is a combination of data sets and tools to make the road design across developing member countries more green, basically. So this is something that we've worked with the DPG Alliance to follow their process in terms of the principles that are there, open source software, open data, etc. So this is a trajectory that we want to continue working on. One of the specific initiatives we're working on is a research on AI as DPG. As you all know, AI is moving very quickly. And how do we make AI systems compatible with the definition, the UN-approved definition of DPG, so that they can be basically more trusted? Does it mean that it needs to be trained on only open data, open weight, open model, open system? Then there's very few AI-enabled systems that follows this definition. So what is the sort of contextual setup that we can agree that it makes AI system as a digital public good? The articulation between DPG and DPI was mentioned before by Prasanna and colleagues, so I'm not going to come back to this. But from the ADB institution, this is something that is key for us, so that there's continuum in the thinking about how we see those systems from an institutional perspective and in support to our operations, and directly support the developing member countries in Asia Pacific. The other point I'd like to mention, and that was partly mentioned by previous speakers, is on the business case for DPI, DPG. So I would like to argue that I think we still need to strengthen the business case for DPG. I again speak from an institutional perspective, but I see this not only an ADB, but other multilateral development organization and other development organization in general, but also at government level. How do we make sure that the solutions that bring all the benefits, social governments, etc., that we've talked about are sustained, and that they provide tangible benefit for the organization, and when from the outside perspective for the citizen. And then what it translates into is how do we ADB position ourselves to support teams, partners, government in the transition towards DPG without sort of disturbing the ecosystem, and what are the shifts that are required in terms of how technology is procured, for example, how it's governed and sustained over time. So those are the issues that we're working on from an institutional perspective, but that we think have interesting implications and way of thinking about DPG and its transition and support to DPI. With the last point that I think Prasanna and Dustin made earlier about trust, which is at the center of the concept of DPG, DPI, and that is valid also for ADB or other MDB issued system. And it's all about trust and incentive. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Before you go, congratulations on getting the internally developed tool certified by DPG Alliance. Just a question about that tool. Are you working with appropriate sector colleagues to make sure that they're actually including that tool as part of their design of operations? And is there any tracking going on of how the tool is actually being used?
Thank you. So for this particular example, the Green Road Toolkit, this is actually a piece of software that came from the sector. And ADB produced quite a bit of system out of our technical assistance or other projects. Some the IT department is directly involved in because there's touch point with our institutional and internal system. Others that are more detached. Our role in that sort of ecosystem is to support the sort of DPG certification of the DPGA standard that's issued. From a even more internal looking perspective, we're also starting working with our own teams of developer, product manager, etc., to see when relevant. Some systems are very internal, so it's not relevant. But for many of the systems that we're producing, that this product become DPG certified product. So there's a trajectory around this. It includes anything from awareness raising to technical workshops and other, but it goes beyond the pure tech stack. It also includes, procurement, legal, and other parts of the organization. The same sort of consideration and stakeholders that previous speakers talk about, but from a sort of internal ADB perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Are there any questions online that? Okay.
There is a question online which talks about, with the advent of AI, how does that influence the building and adoption of DPI and DPGs themselves? And interestingly, they have posed this AI itself. How itself can be standalone DPI if used for public good?
Thank you. Very good question. And that's the work we're doing. So we've partnered with the UN Office for Digital Emerging Technology, with the Macau, the UN University Macau AI Center, to produce this sort of knowledge piece that will, as much as possible, try to answer these questions. There was a lot of surveying that was done in the past few weeks and months. The report should come out in the coming weeks, but basically it's a pretty complicated, because yes, there's many different parts, many different stakeholders, and not to mention a pretty fast-moving piece of technology. So short answer is stay tuned. We'll get some write-up on this. Now, in relation to this, ADB just got its responsible AI framework approved, and this was a pretty long trajectory. That started a while ago. ADB president just approved it week before last. It will be released, and the framework in itself is, of course, interesting. The journey that got to the framework is, I think, equally interesting, and we're looking at sharing the trajectory with interested organization, DMC and others. And maybe even more interesting is the associated tools, so that when ADB looks at not necessarily a full-fledged AI system, but a system that has an AI component, that set of tools can assess whether it follows the responsible AI framework. And this is, again, a piece that will become a DPG. We want to make this publicly available. So again, following the DPG Alliance certification process. And in this case, again, both the actual pieces of work, so the tools and the responsibility, but also the journey that led to this. Because for many organization or government in the region, they will have to customize to their own, setup, context, etc. So the journey might be interesting to look into. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I do feel like somebody stole that question from me. But as we've heard all through the day, the AI/DPI conversation is inextricably intertwined. So We are running out of time. Just want to quickly check with Dasun if you wanted to add something on this. I know it's very early for you. You probably want to get back to bed. But any thoughts on AI/TPI before we move to the next session here?
Yes. I think AI will be an enabler. But what I feel is we still need the foundational DPIs because you need to identify a person. So the identity will be there. You need to make sure departments or ministries can share data. So you need the data exchange component. Then payments component, similarly, you need to accept payments as well as G2P. So what I see is AI will enable the faster, better service delivery for governments, but some of these key DPIs will remain as it is. On the developer front, the good thing is we'll be able to develop DPGs very fast. But the problem is, you can see even on the internet, the vibe coding, all that culture, how does it align with the best practices, right? So how does we make sure that the code we build using AI is ethical? So I think those safeguards, the important frameworks that you mentioned, the important work that is done by many organizations are very critical at this point to make sure that AI, we are responsibly using AI to deliver better, effective services to citizens. But having said that, I think AI is a key enabler to leapfrog even for countries like Sri Lanka to deliver better services.
Thank you very much, Dasun. And I'm going to end with thanking both Dasun and Mark. Did you want to just add something? Because we need to run to the... Sure. We did hope for a 90-minute session on this, but yes.
No, yes. What do you reply to, I don't know, clients, countries, or who tell you maybe that using the DPG approach will be more challenging for them because it means maybe more in-house skills, because I mean I come more from the GIS Earth observation background where we have this kind of open source approach, and then you have the more vendor approach. And I know that it's often the case where, you have maybe some, countries who say, yes, okay, this is very exciting, the open source approach, but then it's challenging for us to maintain, develop on the longer term because maybe we don't have the capacities in-house. So yeah, what would you reply? I don't know.
We're running out of time here. I will just quickly take I guess my moderator's privilege to say that great question, a real concern in many environments. And I myself heard that open source is a luxury for rich, advanced economies and not necessarily for poorer ones. There are many models out there in which sort of open source approaches have been proven to be effective. And I'm going to actually just say that maybe as part of the next session, as we come up, we address this as well, because I do want to give the other groups their allotted time as well. So we can have a conversation on this, but hopefully it can be covered as part of the discussion also, because it applies to those discussions too. So now to the regional integration team.
Thank you, Prasanna. Great conversation, and continuing with that theme, we're now on South-South collaboration. We're now going to be talking a little bit about regional DPIs. We've spoken a lot about how countries are building DPIs, but in parallel, there are some interesting conversations happening around the potential for DPIs that are cross-border. And we've seen some existing examples of this already. For example, in ID, we've seen examples in the Nordic countries across the European Union where citizens are able to use a single ID. We've seen examples in finance and payments where across Africa there's the PAPS DPI that allows for local common currency payments, local currency payments across a few countries in Africa. There's obviously UPI in India, which is being leveraged across different countries in South Asia. And we are also seeing some innovation, interesting innovation around logistics and trade with the Trade Trust in Singapore, which is being used as a common DPI across Singapore, China, Africa network. And it's in early stages, but it's shown some potential. There's also a lot of potential in some innovative sectors like disaster management, generally around climate adaptation, around tourism, energy, where cross-border DPI can be leveraged. But progress has been slow, and progress has been slow because of a number of reasons. There is limited trust across borders in governance, in policies that are set by countries. Countries are obviously moving towards sovereignty as a principle. That's one challenge. The other challenge is that interoperability across systems is hard to implement. For these cross-border systems. I guess UPI perhaps has shown the way to do that. ID has shown the way to do that, but probably more difficult to do it in sectoral DPI. And capacity is a real challenge. I mean, countries sit at very different levels of capacity, as we had shown earlier in the sessions, and as our report has also shown that the capacity of countries to build DPI in general is very different, a very different level of maturity, and therefore, how do you get countries to coordinate and build a DPI that's cross-regional? So to sort of have this conversation, we have one slide, which is a guiding slide, but it really talks about theoretically what could an approach look like, right? An approach could start with identifying what are the most feasible use cases that two countries or a number of countries within a region can identify. What are some of the low-hanging fruit where citizens and trade can sort of be encouraged through DPI. The second is to then agree on the how to implement this, which is what are the minimum standards of interoperability, what are the minimum standards of governance that are required to implement this. And then the third is what would this look like in terms of governance from an institutional perspective? Who manages this? What do successful platforms look like, and so on and so forth. This is obviously a theoretical approach. We do have one question. We have some prompts as a question for the panelists who will be speaking shortly. One of the questions is that what has held cross-border interoperability back? If you can touch upon that in your remarks, and what do you think a successful pilot looks like? To talk about this, we have two panelists. Number one, we'll probably start with Uttam, and Uttam, as part of BIMSTEC, which encourages regional cooperation in South Asia and Southeast Asia across trade, tech, and security. I'll hand it over to you, Uttam, to talk about how in these cooperation arrangements between countries, where does DPI fit in, and has there been any progress made around some use cases, some sectors? So over to you, Uttam.
Good afternoon, good morning. I am based in Dhaka at the moment. It is almost 10 a.m. early morning. Do you hear me well? Do you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So good morning and good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I thank ADB for organizing this workshop, which is a very important and relevant topic. So as you already mentioned that I am Uttam, I work at the BIMSTEC Secretariat here in Dhaka, which is a regional organization with 7 countries as its member, 5 from the South Asia and then 2 from the Southeast Asia. And then you have most of the issues you have already highlighted in the background about the difference in maturity, difference in the economic prosperity and different level of development within these member states. So regarding the digital public infrastructure from the BIMSTEC perspective, it is basically about connecting national systems to reduce frictions, build trust, and delivering tangible regional value. So what we see that uh, emerging at the moment is a strong case for minimum common layers should be developed, like common standards, interoperable APIs, and shared governance principles rather than uniform platforms is focused at the moment. Over the past 2 years, BIMSTEC has increasingly treated digital transformation as a cross-cutting enabler. This was evident during the BIMSTEC regional consultation on the Global Digital Compact, which was held in Dhaka, where member states focused on emphasizing safe, inclusive, and interoperable digital systems. Recently, in the last summit, sixth summit held in Bangkok, it adopted a Bangkok Vision 2030, which reaffirmed digital infrastructure and emerging technologies as central to resilience, regional resilience, and preparedness. So in practical terms, BIMSTEC sees immediate opportunities for regional DPI, cooperation in payments, trade facilitation, logistic data exchange, and climate and disaster-related information sharing. Since we have also established a center for, we are on the process of establishing disaster management center in India, and also weather and climate change center is already established in India. So these are the centers where this DPI could be very much useful platforms. So also we recall that there was a workshop in Kathmandu, Nepal, which was focused on cross-border digital payment. During the workshop, countries focused on establishing some regulatory and technical sandbox for cross-border digital payments, and which sandbox approaches can provide a low-risk environment to test interoperability, governance arrangements, and operational readiness before scaling up. So we see that there is a strong value in structured policy dialogue platforms, not one-off events, but sustained practitioner exchange in this regard. So we have also recently agreed to hold another similar kind of workshop to discuss on this cross-border payment related issues among the BIMSTEC member states. So in this context, we see that BIMSTEC can not only view this in isolation. We can also see the scope of engaging with other regional organizations like SASIC, where we can develop in aligning corridors, standards, discussions, and pilot use cases which are appropriate. So at the moment, to make clear, at the moment we do not have such kind of platforms which we have already developed regarding DPI, but we are still working with member states so that we could have some cross-border interoperability and policy alignment regarding this digital payment, digital public infrastructures. So I stop here at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Uttam. I think what really stood out in what you just said is these structured policy dialogues should not be a one-off event. If you have to push these cross-border DPIs forward, then some sort of mechanism needs to be created where policymakers can come together and talk about and learn from each other and move the needle forward. We'll come back to you with questions, but I wanted to bring in Nilay now, who can talk about his work with SASIC and how, Nilay, you were thinking about DPI. Are there any use cases, sectors that have already been prioritized where there's some progress being made? And if you can also touch upon the challenges that this journey has sort of put forward. Over to you, Nilay.
Yeah, thank you, Kunal, and thank you, Uttam, and all other participants for your very, very insightful interventions. Let me quickly mention that SASIC is more at an operational level. So, some people get a little confused between what's the objective of BIMSTEC, what's the objective of SASIC. So we work more at the operational level, while at the strategic level, and there are other forums. But we actually go down and drill down at a very, very operational level to translate some of these vision or strategies into actual actions. SASEC has four operational priorities. One is transport connectivity, second is trade facilitation, third is energy connectivity and energy trade, and fourth is economic corridor development. So while these operational priorities, we are mostly focused on knowledge and projects. So that's our, to convert that into actual action on the ground. We have actually been, discussing on this. What are the digital pieces that can help, achieve the objectives of these four operational priorities? So let me quickly mention some of the, cases that we have identified where, cross-border collaboration could be quickly built. One, of course, is the payment systems, which I'm sure, India on both bilateral and a multilateral basis is, progressing. So BIMSTEC is a forum, and then you have this cross-border arrangements of India's UPI. So that's one piece which is moving, may I say, quite satisfactorily. Second piece, which when we looked into, was whether can there be an interoperable systems of logistics and efficiency models across the borders. So whenever we look at certain things, we first try to understand what is the national utility of that particular DPI, how well it is being used in terms of rendering the digital public goods. Then we look at what could be a cross-border utility function that could come out of it. We also look at not only cross-border, but the regional utility function, the global utility function. So we try to describe and, delve deep into that, because unless we have this utility functions clearly defined and identified, there wouldn't be a system that could be built around that. So let me, give a little bit of some cases where we have identified where there is a national utility function, there is a regional utility, cross-border utility function, regional utility function, the global utility function. So in the transport sector, we have identified one which is there is the unified logistics interface, platform which India has built to transform its logistics sector and substantially bring down the ease of doing business in the logistics sector, as well as has been we have seen tremendous improvement in the logistics cost. Now, imagine a situation that if you had a similar utility function that can be defined in Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and other SASIC partner countries, and they build their own unified logistics interface platforms, and the ULIPs of each country can speak to each other, then the entire logistics chain for cross-border, regional, and even global is built. And that brings efficiencies in trade, in movement of goods, across cross borders in the region, and even track and traceability right up to the destination, be it in Europe or in the US. So this we are working very closely in the SASEC platform to work with the countries to see first of all whether it makes a national utility function obvious for that particular country. Otherwise, they wouldn't bill it. If there is no national utility function, they won't bill it. Then how do we when they are building the national systems, how they can collaborate with each other in terms of the cross-border and regional interoperability. So that's one piece that we are working on, and on the transport side. On the trade facilitation side, each country has been developing their own national single windows. So customs and the partner government product specific regulators, they have their own agencies. Now, can there be a system where the NSWs can speak to each other so that you don't have to manually exchange, export import data, and they are exchanged much in advance and electronically both. So you have a pre-arrival exchange of information systems, and that is not only pre-arrival in the sense of exchanging data which is over email or but having a system which if one entry is done at one place, it then automatically populates the NSW of the other country. So we are looking at interoperability between the NSWs. The dialogue has already begun. We have on the SASEC platform, both under the custom subgroup as well as in the trade facilitation working group, we are discussing this, and we are trying to see how these systems can be built. a pre-exchange information system, pre-arrival exchange of information study has also been completed by ADB, and it is being discussed very, very deeply within with the SASAC partner countries. So that's on the trade facility. I'm just saying that there could be many other things, but the ones that we have identified are of which could be of great utility to the countries, and also have a lot of facilitation for trade. Third thing that we are looking for the energy sector are on in terms of, first of all, defining what an energy stack should look like for a country. So I think it's a little away from interoperable systems between cross-border, but it is on sort of defining the utility case for building energy stack. India has already taken a lot of action in building the energy stack. We have some idea of what that cross-border or a regional utility function could be, and we are trying to work on that. We have circulated this concept to the countries. We are awaiting their response. On the economic corridor, what we identified was something which is of great importance in terms of infrastructure planning, is the National Spatial Data Infrastructure and Systems, what we call as NSDIS. In India, they call it as PM Gati Shakti Network Platform, but essentially it's a national spatial data infrastructure and systems, which is used for multiple planning. Be it initially it had the utility function in a national case for infra planning of all kinds, whether it is transmission lines, whether it is transport, whether it is multimodal transport, and so on and so forth. So we are looking at how these, if the countries build up their own NSDIS and they have the level of maturity of using the NSDIS for reach a level of maturity of using NSDIS for their own national planning on infrastructure, could we then have interoperable systems where these can speak across the border so that your multimodal regional master planning could be done on a digital, it could be on transport, it could be even for transmission lines and so on and so forth, including in delineating economic corridors and how things operate in the economic corridors could be built under the NSDIS. So this is the piece, NSDIS, the national NSDIS systems, their utility functions in the national case, and then in the interoperable case across borders. This we have defined, and we have pulled all these put together into what we call as a SASAC digital transformation approach paper for 2035, looking at 2035. And this has now been, this was the request in the SASAC partner countries in the Kathmandu session of SASAC, both the working groups and also the senior officials meeting. They have all been conceptualized. Each country is at different levels of maturity in each of them. And we are trying to see whether we can pull those thoughts together to define what we call as a cross-border utility function, which is defined in the concept paper approach paper that we have prepared, and also whether there could be a global utility function for this also, because that brings the, because nobody does it only for regional sense or cross-border sense. Once you build a system, it will also operate for then a global utility, for global utility also. So this is the approach that we are taking. We found that there was a very strong support from the SASAC partner countries in moving this way, identifying very specific cases of cross-border and cross-border utilities, as well as global utility functions for the efforts that we are trying to put in, so that the countries are very clear. If we do this, what's the benefit? What's the utility? So that's the approach we have taken, and we found a very strong endorsement. The approach paper has been prepared. It is circulated to the countries, and we would be very shortly holding, again, a workshop for the countries to discuss this, and then we will work out what, even we have discussed what can be done in the short run by the countries, what can be done in the medium run and the long run by the countries, and we will be seeking the countries' endorsement. Once it is endorsed, then we will be investing a lot of effort, time, and resources on the knowledge works to unravel those pieces and operationalize them. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nilay. This is very encouraging and very interesting. I don't think there are other regional bodies that have operationally been involved in thinking through so much in terms of how different sectors can be linked through DPI. We unfortunately don't have time for questions. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, but maybe we can do that in a separate forum. But thank you, Uttam. Thank you, Nilay, for your time. We will now move into the last part of this discussion and hand it back to Ant.
Yeah, thank you so much to our discussants and to the online audience who have been quite active, I understand, in terms of putting in questions, and some of you also want to come in to speak. We've set ourselves the target to cover one more topic, and we shall do that. And for that, we've invited two collaborators, Fidya from CDPI and Afrin Siddiqui from UNDP. There are also many others online who are part of this group, but I have a quick kickoff question and slide for you both. And the topic that we want to quickly cover is how do we actually look at learning across countries? Obviously, what we see already in this session, which we titled South Asia DPI Practitioner Roundtable, there's a lot of interest in sharing across. There is so much more that we could cover in this session. And so what are the venues really to make that happen? In this slide, we've conceptualized a little bit the various different parts of actually looking at a DPI journey, and we have asked the questions, what are the best modalities to do so? Now, Findy and Afrin have different ways of looking at this, and I wanted to give both the opportunity to quickly shine a light on what's working for you, where you think this cross-country learning is going at the moment. So maybe I can start with Afrin, if you can just tell us what you've set up and how what things are looking like at the moment and what you are moving towards in the future. And if you can be brief, we should be able to still do the wrap up within time. Thanks, Afrin.
Thank you so much, Aunt, for laying the pressure on the two last women standing. And I'm also, by the way, joined by Sri Ganesh, my colleague from UNDP regional team. Thanks a lot, for giving us this opportunity. And I must say that this has been quite a learning for the last 1 hour. What we have seen in the region is there is a lot of curiosity. Without naming the country, I would like to say that there are many policymakers who are still, struggling to understand how would DPI best fit in their case. In fact, there are mid-level policymakers who are asking questions like, I want to understand what exactly is DPI. So there is a lot of curiosity, and curiosity always gives rise to this whole appetite for learning by doing, and that is UNDP's philosophy when we engage with governments. Just to maybe summarize the response in 3 points. The first one is more on when you have this curiosity from the governments, they always look at which are the countries that have been there, done that. And what we try to do as UNDP is reach out to governments within the region, outside the region, to make sure the contexts are good enough for our learners who are sitting on the learning by doing and the driving seat to be able to contextualize and customize in their case. We try to, we always keep saying it's not one size fit all, but customizing is equally difficult, as we heard from our colleagues from SASIC and BIMSTEC. So we help customize that, and that's the first approach. The second approach is we keep hearing this word like 10,000 times, that ministries operate in silos, and it is very difficult for data interoperability, data sharing, cross-ministerial collaboration. So to ensure we are living the spirit of whole of government, what we are now trying to do is introduce a new concept called transformation teams. And by transformation teams, we mean that this will be one team in the government, which is not, separated by ministries. It is coming together to work on a common problem. So if there is a common problem statement, we understand that they kill the ministerial silos, and they all come together to be able to do that. So we are trying to introduce that concept in our new flagship, which I'll come to the third point on. So the third point that I wanted to mention, there are lots of stakeholders in the ecosystem doing amazing work It's a very strong market, including philanthropists, technical agencies and multilateral development organizations, including MDBs and UN agencies, etc. What we heard and we thought was lacking, is a journey-based support that one could offer to the government partners. So, 4 days workshops, 3-hour capacity building trainings are good. But what policymakers needed were like complete support on hands-on, journey to help them convert their learnings into action. And this challenge, helped us design something that we are together working with ADB on. It's called as the AI and DPI Stewards Community. So we have, now soft launched last year at the DPI Summit, and hopefully going to be hard launching this year, the AI and DPI Stewards Cohort, which is a deeper learning by doing cohort that lands into actual DPIs and AIs and policies that they can be embedded. So we are choosing champions from the governments who are actually going to be working together as transformation teams. All the curiosity is not just going to be converting into webinars and learning sessions and physical, events and summits, but this is going to be, their exercise to prove that they can actually convert their learning into action. So together with ADB, we have launched this last year, and we are very excited about this journey. We will keep everyone posted on how this goes, but that's my quick response to your question, Ant. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for rushing through this. There's a lot that can be said about all the needs on the side of government stakeholders. So thank you. I want to go to Findi now, and you have a slightly different perspective. You work really across the globe, very hands-on as technical advisors. Can you give us a picture from your perspective, what's needed and what you're planning to do? Findi.
Thanks, Arn. In my screen, I have 1 minute left. Do I actually have only 1 minute left? No, right?
I think we can overrun by a couple minutes, but let's try to wrap up in the next 5.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. My name is Findi. I work for Center for Digital Public Infrastructure as part of the country engagement team and responsible for Asia. So I would like to react to your question, Arn. I think I would like to start with an anecdote, perhaps. They say that raising a child takes a village, right? I think we do see that designing and building a DPI do takes a village as well. As in, it shouldn't be a solo journey. Not for countries, not for MDBs, not for organizations like CDPI as well. And this is what we see from CDPI's perspective, that most of our effective engagement and support to countries have never been just between us and the countries. It's either with a DPG plus an MDB plus a donor, or plus a research organization, or with the rest of the private ecosystem. This is what we have seen work. And if I may add or expand more, is that they say you can tell that your solution or your building block is a truly DPI when it helps you work less. It helps government work less, save more time, reach out more people, reduce more costs, because of I think we touch upon the principles that it should be modular, it should be reusability. And with that railways that you build, you allow public-private entities to connect and access and help you build innovation on top. And we have seen this in notable DPI examples, best practices that's cited in your report. All of the Indian stacks, Philsys, SingPass, they have these criteria. But one of the bad news is that we think There's no single playbook that captures how to do it all, unfortunately. And one of the key things to get this right is, I think, to get the architecture and design right from the beginning. So picking up from CDPI experience so far, we think the most effective peer learning mechanisms that could work is that when we find the right partner, examples, experience, directly start from your one building block that you would like to upgrade. So for examples, if we want to lean on countries' experience, say you want to upgrade your ID, there are many good examples, right? Aadhaar, it's built on proprietary system, but still open and modular, currently rolled out in 99% of its population. PhilSys using open source and currently also rolled out in 90% of its targeted population. Or we can also look at Bhutan NDI, one of the most advanced decentralized ID the world is now witnessing. On payment, we also have many good examples. UPI currently taking 49% of global real-time digital payments, or Pay Now from Singapore, or PromptPay from Thailand, who has also become the backbone of the country's welfare programs. On data sharing, we have many also good examples from the region. In your report, you noted KMDX using open solutions, using X-Road solutions. We have DigiLocker and account aggregator from India, as well as Singapore Apex and SingPass, which adopts pure API gateway. And on top of all of that, I think we have, as Afrin noted, we do have vast global resources that countries and all of us advisors can tap on. The UN 50 and 5 are hoping to bring 50 countries by 2028 to accelerate their DPI journeys. The UNDP ADB DPI stewards DPI AI stewards cohorts, Asia Pacific will also do that. And CDPI, we are working with the ecosystem also to help advise getting that design and architecture right from the beginning. So to answer back your question, Arn, and I'm closing now. I think the best assets that travel best across countries, you start from country's experience, country's pain points, country's entry points, your design strategy, or you can also rely on multilateral partners, development partners that can help you customize or compare the options that you have, and populate all of this information and have this ready for countries, and then all of us we can build more innovation on top. So I'll pause there, Arn. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And apologies for the rush. We do have so much to say. I think summarizing a little bit of what you said is context hugely matters. So we do need to adapt and really think about what we bring our best practices to. I think you both pointed to that. And the varied stakeholders and diverse audience that we need to think about when we think of learning for DPI, from the decision maker to the funder to the procurement person to the finance person. I mean, there's such a huge spectrum. What we also, I think, in this entire session realized is the various platforms that we already have in place, from our regional, sub-regional platforms like SASEC and BIMSTEC, the knowledge sharing activities that ADB is supporting and partnering on with you both and many others. So I think we can look towards the coming year and years with a lot of positive optimism that there's a lot that's going to happen. We do have ADB investing into this space. So for us, these are in a way also forays into this space where we learn and consider them maybe as also testing ground for new ideas and bringing in a lot of these best practices via US partners. So a lot to look forward to. We're going to close out this session with just the quick point towards what's coming very soon from Carolyn, and then we'll close the Zoom session. Thank you so much for dialing in from my side, and over to Carolyn for the last words.
Thanks, Arndt. And thank you, everyone, for staying online, and to all of our discussants for joining us. Really great. I know that we tried to pack a lot in, and each of these could have been their own 90-day sessions. It could have gone on, and just really appreciate you taking the time. Just to summarize the conversation, I just to go back, I think Dasun went back to sleep, hopefully, but I appreciated what he said this morning around how can we shorten the distance from government investment to citizen impact, and always thinking about all of our comments and discussions this morning. We're really linking investment to that service delivery. So how can we be nimble or as agile as a multilateral development bank, and how can our investments really be looking to affect ecosystems, to be as whole of government, whole of society. Some key points that came up in a lot of the points of our discussants was around, first really looking to collecting that data, building the foundation. Jordan referenced this as well, really building that. And the second, learning from that evidence. We're still relatively new, but we have a lot more use cases, a lot of evidence, including our amazing study that was just published by the South Asia region in Dahlberg around examples, very concrete examples on DPI implementations. Third, to Afreen's point, around learning by doing, the work that UNDP, CDPI, and others, both at a regional level, at a country level, and then that country-to-country collaboration. And the fourth is, as Findi very eloquently put it, and just to double down on that, really looking at partnership. And, Afreen and Findi, CDPI, UNDP are some of our core partners, and we've learned so much, and we're going into countries together. We're really recognizing that this is an ecosystem approach, that the ADB cannot do it together, or cannot do it by ourselves. We have to do it together. So really appreciate the conversation, encourage everyone to dig into very specific, great examples from the region, outside the region, around DPI utilization. Thank you so much for joining us today, and really look forward to engaging with all of you moving forward. And the ADB continues to make investments and build our work in the DPI space. So please look to us in the future as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And any unanswered questions, please do email us. We will also try and track that still. And we'll share the recording and any links shared in the chat after we wrap up. Bye, everyone. Take care.